The momentum building among House Republicans in support of bipartisan legislation to compel the Justice Department to release the Jeffrey Epstein case files. So much so that sources tell us now that House Speaker Johnson is abandoning his delaying tactics and will instead try to expedite a vote. Meantime, CNN has learned more about the special treatment that Epstein accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell is receiving at the so-called Club Fed prison, the camp she was recently transferred to, even as she pushes for the president to commute her sentence, something he has not ruled out.
Would you consider a pardon or a commutation for Ghislaine Maxwell if cooperating?
It's something I haven't thought about. It's really something. It's something I'm allowed to do it, but it's something I have not thought about. Well, I'm allowed to give her a pardon, but nobody's approached me with it. Nobody's asked me about it. I'll take a look at it. I will speak to the DOJ. I wouldn't consider it or not consider it. I don't know anything about it.
But she was convicted of child sex trafficking.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to take a look at it. I have to ask DOJ.
Well, as she waits in the camp she was transferred to after praising the president to his former personal attorney, Todd Blanche, who's now the deputy attorney general, we've been learning about her life there. Safe to say it's a better life than her fellow inmates. CNN's MJ Lee broke the story. She joins us now. So it was already questionable that she got moved to this minimum security prison camp earlier this year. Convicted sex offenders, that normally doesn't happen. Tell us what you've learned about her life since getting there.
Well, there's no question, Anderson, that she is being given accommodations that would not be typically given to the average inmate. And this photo, actually, that we're looking at on the screen was taken on September 20th at this Bryan, Texas minimum security prison facility. According to the photographer that day, she was seen during the lunch break carrying folders, a clear backpack, and headphones. But just in terms of the details that we learned about her life, the big thing is that she's largely isolated and she's being afforded a level of privacy that inmates typically don't get. For example, her roommates at some point were moved out of her room. There are typically 4 roommates that share a room at this prison facility. When she didn't like at one point that inmates were able to look into her cell, sitting at tables that were close to the entrance, the tables were then moved. We also have an example of her using the chaplain's office at the chapel at the prison for visitations outside of regular visitation hours. A couple other details: meals and mail were at one point being brought to her. We're also learning that she has unlimited access to toilet paper. Typically, just for context, each inmate gets 2 rolls per week. Anything over that, you have to go to the commissary and buy a roll at $2.25 a pop. So remember, the important context and the timing of this is really important, too, because there was this whistleblower that came out earlier this week and talked about some of these details and some additional details as well, including the fact that Maxwell apparently is working on a commutation application and the prison's warden has been giving her help as she has been working on that.
And some of Maxwell's fellow inmates are apparently upset about her being there. Are they speaking out?
Yeah, there was a lot of shock and I think outrage for many of the inmates inside this prison because, as you noted, when you are a convicted child sex trafficker and you also have the vast majority of that sentence still to serve, you don't just end up at a minimum security prison. And I'm told that the warden at one point actually had a town hall meeting with all of the inmates after Maxwell arrived. And she basically said, do not talk about her to anybody. And she also said, look, she's going to be treated like any other inmate. But there's an example of one fellow inmate at Bryan. Her name is Julie Howell, and she actually ended up giving a comment to a reporter. She actually had a daughter who was the victim of sex trafficking. So you can imagine why the presence of Maxwell in her prison would have been especially sort of troubling for her and really offensive, I think, in her view. And after she gave this comment to a reporter, she was summoned to the lieutenant's office. She was scolded. And then she eventually was transferred out of Bryan to a higher security prison in Houston. And what's interesting, Anderson, is that we have learned that apparently this has happened to several other inmates as well who have expressed concern about Maxwell being there.
And has anyone offered any explanation as to why Maxwell is being given special treatment?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we don't have actually a good answer as to why she was transferred to this Texas prison in the first place. So that's question number one. And second, in terms of just the different accommodations that are being made, a BOP official basically said that they have a duty to make sure that any inmate, regardless of who they are, they have to be kept safe. And an official said that basically there had been death threats that were being made to her. And so all of these accommodations were really important to try to keep her safe.
All right. MJ Lee, thanks very much. I want to get perspective now from former Trump campaign advisor David Urban and former Democratic South Carolina State Representative Bakari Sellers. David, at this point, I mean, the steady drip of Epstein news cannot possibly be beneficial to the White House. Why do you think the president and his top officials have been fighting this effort to release the files?
Yeah, Anderson, I have no idea. Like many others in the party, I think would just like to see it be dumped a long time ago. Get everything out there. It is out there. Let the cards fall where they might. Let's put this behind us. I think what I've repeatedly said, Anderson, I think the most important thing. I'm sure these files are interesting. I don't think they're going to be damning for the president. I think there was anything in there that would have been leaked out by the past administration over the 4 years that they were in there. But I always keep saying, like, why don't we just call in the prosecutors who did this case, the federal prosecutors in Southern District of Miami, the U.S. attorney, and let's ask them why they gave Jeffrey Epstein a sweetheart deal. That's, I think, the most important question here. Why did he get a sweetheart deal? What were the causes behind that? Not so much what's in these files at this point. I mean, I think everything that is going to be out at this point, but just dump it, get it out. I mean, the president ran on it. I think people want to know, Republicans, Democrats, and it is not getting better. It might go away after the House has this vote. The Senate's not going to take it up. The president surely won't sign it. So it'll become a moot point at some point soon. But they're a big part of the MAGA-verse and others that want to see transparency.
Bakari, I mean, it's interesting because David was talking about the prosecutors down in Florida. One of them had reportedly been prepared to have a multi-count, I mean, dozens of count indictment, but that was not taken up by the lead attorney, obviously, who has appeared before Congress. Do you see any alternative strategy the White House could adopt besides releasing the files? Obviously, I mean, if they did pass the Senate and it got as far as the president's desk, which, as David says, is highly unlikely, do you think the ramifications of him not releasing them would be great?
So there is an alternative strategy. I think you just laid it out, which is just to kind of let time heal all. The problem is this is a bed that Donald Trump has made. I mean, he's been talking about the Epstein files since 2015. And I think that it becomes a little bit more complicated than what my good friend David Urban said when you're talking about just have the prosecutor who gave him the sweetheart deal come and testify in front of Congress, because now we have evidence that Ghislaine Maxwell is getting a sweetheart deal currently as she's sitting in federal prison, and she's in accommodations that are not necessarily deemed for those who are child sex offenders or child sex traffickers. And so it becomes a little bit more complicated than that. And we also know that she sat down with Todd Blanche for, I believe, 9 hours. And we know that the comments she gave Deputy Attorney General Blanche are diametrically opposed to the emails that came out. And so, yeah, I think that the only thing that you can do, people always say that sunshine is the best disinfectant. Right now, there is a great deal of hesitancy, not just from the MAGA base, but everyone. And then you have other politics at play. I mean, you have people like Nancy Mace who signed on to the discharge petition, and she's running for governor of the state of South Carolina. Does that mean that somebody else, for example, gets that endorsement? So there's so many politics at play. But at the end of the day, one of the things that we know to be a fact is that Donald Trump palled around with the most notorious sex offender we have in the country. And he is reticent to giving the American public the full context of that relationship and Jeffrey Epstein's relationships with others.
David, why wouldn't the president he's been asked multiple times about commuting Ghislaine Maxwell's sentence. Why wouldn't he just say, yeah, no, she's a convicted sex offender, or it's not something I would. I mean, he's talked about, I'll talk to the Justice Department. I don't know anything about it, which is what he often says.
Hey, Anderson, I don't have an answer for you. I don't know. I dispute with what Bakari says. Listen, at the end of the day, when all this gets out there, I don't think Donald Trump's going to have any fingerprints anywhere on these documents. Obviously, I can't be certain. I've not reviewed 30,000 plus pages or whatever there is left remaining. But again, I would suspect that during the 4 years of the Biden administration, if there were some damning, Anderson, you and I and Bakari, we sat and watched Donald Trump be led into courtroom after courtroom by Democrats, in power, trying to take the guy down. If there was a kernel of something in there that could take Donald Trump down, it would have been leaked already many, many years ago. So I think they should dump it, get over it, move past it quickly, move on to things that people care about in America, like, pocketbook issues, their inflation and jobs. And I think this administration would do well to get to that point and start talking about the things they're doing to make people's lives better.
David Urban, Bakari Sellers, thank you.